Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up.
Oh, that's because it's Friday. Oh. 8 segments to beer o'clock. All right, there's news. I'm sure you've heard it by now, but let's just do the weekend review, shall we? And 1 and 2 and... Yes, we will. We will.
What's up? I'm not really white power, man. I just came here for the fun. Fuck.
Nah.
I'm sorry.
You can't just take your costume off.
We are determined to take our country back. We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump. That's what we believed in. That's why we voted for Donald Trump, because he said he's going to take our country back, and that's what we got to do.
Some more questions. It doesn't bother me at all, but I like real news, not fake news. Give fake news. Thank you, everybody.
That's important.
Haven't you spread a lot of fake news yourself, sir?
I wanted to make sure, unlike most politicians, that what I said was correct, not make a quick statement. The statement I made on Saturday, the first statement, was a fine statement. The driver of the car is a murderer. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? Knowledge, with great knowledge.
What were the many sides you were talking about, sir?
There's still things that people don't know.
What was the other side?
I make a statement with knowledge. I wanted to know.
Where does it end? Because our founders, many of which were slave owners. Do we discredit them?
Thomas Jefferson also was a slave owner.
Jefferson was also a slaveholder.
Yes. George Washington was a slave owner.
In Charlottesville, to me, I'm sort of glad that them people got hit, and I'm glad that girl died. To me, they were a bunch of communists out there protesting against somebody's freedom of speech.
That the President of the United States, Donald Trump, is unfit to be the President of the United States. We're in a presidential crisis of leadership because his moral authority is gone with these constituencies that are essential for him to govern.
Our booking team, and they're good, reached out to Republicans of all stripes across the country today.
Officials, and none of them agreed to discuss this issue with us today.
Yes, but the invitation is clearly still very much open.
Okay, so let's make sense of everything. Let's put the new news, the Friday news, in with last week's news, and let's see if we can figure out what the hell is going on.
Okay, so here's what Steve is probably thinking. Steve has been marginalized by the Trump administration for months now. There are a number of figures who are being given more power than he was. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, H.R. McMaster, John Kelly, the list goes on, Gary Cohn. And so he'd obviously been marginalized. Whether he chose to quit 2 weeks ago, as the New York Times is reporting, or whether he was fired by the chief of staff, it was pretty obvious to Bannon, clearly, that he was on his way out. And so you have to see his activity over the last week as a real reflection of that knowledge. So in the last week, what he's done is he's pushed Trump to not disassociate from the alt-right. He's pushed him to not disassociate from what he considers Bannon's base. And Trump acquiesced because that's who Trump is. And Bannon is seeking to now capitalize on that. He gave that interview to the American Prospect where he ripped Trump's foreign policy up and down, proclaimed that he wanted a trade war with China, proclaimed that Trump's foreign policy was essentially too interventionist, and now he's going back to Breitbart. All of that is setting up the battle lines. The battle lines are going to be that Bannon was ousted because the globalists took control of the Trump administration, that Trump has betrayed his base, and that Bannon is the actual real leader of the populist, nationalist, alt-right movement. The alt-right is a small wing of that, but not the whole movement. But that Bannon is the true leader of that movement. Bannon is a super ambitious, deeply vengeful guy, and he knows that he's just held the most powerful position he will ever hold, unless his new position is going to be helping to tear down Trump and build himself up in the process.
Okay.
Okay, so here's what...
Thank you, Ben Shapiro. Okay. He said okay. All right, so here's what happened. It's Friday, and they always dump news on Friday. The news today is that Steve Bannon is out at the White House. Now, Ben Shapiro, who you heard there being interviewed, is the former editor-at-large at Breitbart. He left. And he's now sounding the horn. He's now, the British are coming, right? He's now Paul Revere. He stands on that wall, and he protects you on that wall. Ben Shapiro does. But Ben Shapiro's conclusion, I disagree with. His conclusion there is that Steve Bannon was let go, and that Steve Bannon quit. He doesn't know. He's saying either Steve Bannon quit because he felt marginalized by Donald Trump's cadre around him, the John Kellys, the Ivankas, the Jareds, the Gary Cohens, the Kelly especially, the Mnuchins, the people that were wincing when the president took Steve Bannon's advice to not separate from the white supremacists. I can't believe we're saying these words in 2017, but here we are. And so Bannon felt marginalized and he left. And the reason why he left was to attack Donald Trump. I disagree with that conclusion. Here's what I think. It is now being reported that Bannon had given his resignation to Donald Trump on August 7th. That was my mother's birthday, all right? So that's like a week and a half ago, right? Today's the 17th, for those of you who listen on a podcast, 10 days later. Bannon had submitted his resignation on the 7th, and then Charlottesville occurred. And Bannon was either asked to or ignored. The whole Bannon situation was ignored. And then all of a sudden out of Donald Trump's mouth comes this denunciation of, hatred and bigotry. And then the very next day, Donald Trump comes out and he just loses his crap, apparently. People are starting to question his stability and his sanity because he reverts back to type, which is the Steve Bannon way, and just says out loud, pretty much, I cannot distinguish between racists and supremacists and Nazis and people who would lay down their lives to prohibit racists and Nazis from, slamming their cars into people. Okay, here's what I think happened. I think on August 7th, the president decided that the news media is attacking him for everything. And this might be helpful too, okay? Let me show you what his last month looked like. This was a great little segment on CNN, okay? Brooke Baldwin did it. Looks like Star Wars, everybody, if you're going to watch. But this is the last month, and it's important now because you have to understand why I don't know that... You have to understand that Steve Bannon left, okay? So check this out.
So in no particular order, President Trump in the last 4 weeks has fires his chief strategist, fires his chief of staff, hires a new one, hires a new communications director, fires him, hires a new one, his fourth in 7 months, publicly shames his attorney general multiple times, loses a health care bill, publicly shames the 3 Republicans who voted against it multiple times, bans transgender individuals from the military without telling the military, ticks off the Boy Scouts, makes up a phone call with said scouts, makes up another phone call with the president of Mexico, thanks Vladimir Putin for expelling Americans, hundreds of them, takes days to sign a bipartisan sanctions bill and then blasts Congress for making him sign it, condemns leaks, but then says he likes the leaks because it shows people love him. Hold on a second. Sorry. This is long. Encourages police officers to be rough with suspects during arrests. Publicly shames the Republican leader he needs to get anything done multiple times. embraces an unpassable immigration plan that sparks a debate about the Statue of Liberty and the definition of cosmopolitan. He threatens North Korea with nuclear war, tells Guam it'll help tourism. Then his own chief strategist calls his bluff and says, nah, there's no military option in North Korea. Threatens Venezuela with a military option. After a Nazi rally in which someone was murdered, the president blames both sides. After the backlash, cleans it up, denounces those white supremacists, but then hours later erases all of it and makes everything worse by again blaming both sides, saying there were fine people there. No, they weren't. They were Nazis. Suggests there's no difference between George Washington and Robert E. Lee. Publicly shames CEOs who abandon him, then loses 2 of his entire jobs councils after execs jump ship. Considers a pardon for, of all people, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, all the while he's facing these accusations of racism. By the way, plugs his winery in Virginia when asked if he will, as president, visit Charlottesville. Tells the world to study a lie during a terror attack, and gets condemnations from Democrats, Republicans, former presidents, world leaders, allies, his own staff, and the Pope. And still has no regrets.
It's been a great month, hasn't it, everybody? It's just a great month. All of that is very important. Okay? And when on the other side of the break, I have to take a break, but on the other side of the break, I will explain to you what I think the strategy of Trump and Bannon has now become. They tried Plan A, have Bannon in the White House, have Bannon do things like, attack legal immigration, have Bannon, the president say things about police brutality is great and transgender people suck and let's pardon Joe Arpaio and I'll leak to, the press all this stuff about the infighting that's going on inside the White House and set up, like a little mini war inside the White House and tell people things aren't going great, We know Bannon left. I don't think there's agreement on why, and I have my own unique idea.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit RandiRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Yeah, you could buy tile at a chain store if you wanted to. You could wait for a kid to try and answer your questions about what's this made of or how do I install it or what's in stock. But what if you wanted serious craftsmanship? What if you wanted custom design, handmade, to order from your imagination or an inspiration photo that you love? Probably you think you can't anymore, but I did. When it was time to shop tile, I came across a family-owned business that still handcrafts each and every individual tile, matching your colors, your inspiration, your design. Tempus Tile Works. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and they still handcraft the most magnificent tile. Let them match to your fabrics or to your countertops or to anything you can envision for your bath or kitchen. Teeny tiny tiles to oversized, their art or yours. It's all doable, it's all affordable, and it's all individually made just for your project. Visit Tempus Tile Works and look at their amazing gallery of designs and styles and give up the chain stores. Tempus Tile Works, custom made. TempusTileWorks.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1985. That was the day that workers at the Hormel plant in Austin, Minnesota went out on strike. They were members of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local P9. Hormel had slashed workers' wages by 23% during the early 1980s. Benefits were also diminished and incentive programs rolled back. These changes cut deeply into the Hormel workers' earnings. What had been considered a good job was changing drastically. This was the story for many workers in Reagan-era America. The 3,500 Hormel workers voted overwhelmingly to strike. The National UFCW discouraged the action. The strike lasted more than a year. Strikebreakers were brought in, including some of the union members who crossed the picket line to return to work. The National Guard was called in to keep the peace between strikers and the scabs. After a year, the strike went down in defeat. Even after the strike, many of the workers were not called back to work. They were put on waiting lists for a job to reopen. Some never returned to the plant. 25 years after the strike, the Austin Daily Herald staff wrote, quote, "What resulted was a bitter, drawn-out labor dispute that drastically impacted the community, from workers who lost their jobs to families that were torn apart by the picket lines." The strike became the feature of a documentary by Barbara Koppel. In 1990, the documentary American Dream won the Academy Award. The film tells the story of the Hormel strike as a window into the tragic experiences of many workers during the 1980s. The film was made on a shoestring budget. Singer Bruce Springsteen provided $25,000 to help support this important film. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
All things Randy at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
It sounds as if you're saying that Steve Bannon's ego is just as big as this president's.
Well, I mean, I said that at the time when he was hired. I said that essentially Bannon is Trump's mirror, except he's smarter than Trump. And I think that remains true. He's a very ambitious fellow. He doesn't have any other place to go other than Breitbart. He's not going to get hired as a host at some network. He's not going to get hired by a think tank. His only choice is to now try and seize control of a movement that he truly believes he was instrumental in building, not just Trump. He thinks that he was sort of the boots on the ground and the intellectual veneer for Trumpism, and now he is going to try to seize that mantle from Trump himself if Trump steps out of line. And I think that you'll see that become clear over the coming months, because Trump is likely to do things that don't fall in line with what Bannon would want, or what, for example, Jeff Sessions, who is an ally of Bannon's, would want. And when that happens, I think that you'll see Breitbart suddenly become some of Trump's most vociferous critics. And, of course, I think that Bannon will rely on folks like the people in the left media. Suddenly, the people who Bannon supposedly hates, Bannon will be on all of their shows now, because they don't like Trump either. And so he knows that they'll bring him on to bash Trump, just to bash Trump. And so he's put himself in pretty good position to be a significant thorn in Trump's side over the last couple months, and certainly over the last week.
Well, I guess that will remain to be seen if Steve Bannon accepts bookings from MSNBC and CNN to trash Trump. I don't think that's what's going on here at all. At all. Okay, I agree with everything that, Steve Shapiro there, the former editor-at-large at Breitbart, said about Bannon's ego, about Bannon being vindictive, about Bannon having a list of people that he considers globalists. But I don't think that the reason why Bannon tendered his resignation 10 days ago, but stayed on for another 10 days to put white supremacist talk front and center coming out of the president's mouth himself, and put tweets out there that said that General Lee, who was a slave hunter, he was a brutal freaking man. This version of General Lee, that he was like this kindly man who tried to save the wounds of the terrible Civil War. This is just all crap, and we'll go through that if you'd like. But here's what I think is going on. I think that Bannon did not want to stay in the White House, hence he tendered his resignation. Then Charlottesville happened, and Bannon and Trump said, hey, wait, let's put the brakes on this for just get through this, okay? Because this is a really great opportunity to rally the base. Now, why is he rallying these white supremacists? Because, as I said to Richard Painter yesterday, when the Russia investigation comes, a full force at Trump, and his family starts getting indicted, and the Ivankas of the world, and the Jareds of the world, and maybe even the Donald Jr. who was in that meeting of the world, and they start, drawing up articles of impeachment, which already the Democrats have, started preparing. I want you to know, it's like three Democratic House members have begun to work on articles of impeachment. When that all comes to bear down on Donald Trump is going to need to become a martyr. He is going to need to fall back on something soft and mushy, something that can break his fall. And the soft, mushy thing are these white people, okay? These white Nazis. You've seen them. They're soft. They're mushy. They cry. They're little babies. They're victims, okay? All of them. They're victims. there's a warrant for my arrest, and I'm scared. I was only doing it for fun. Okay, they fold like cheap tents. Okay, they just fold. Okay, and this is who they are. But Trump wants them to catch him. He is trying to protect himself so that when everything comes fully at him, and he is really in peril of. I mean, if he resigns, he's going to jail, right? If Mueller is, doing money laundering, which he is. And if he doesn't resign, then he'll be impeached and then indicted. He's going to need some people to rally around him as if he were a martyr. And those are the people, the white supremacists, the Nazis. Those are the people that will rally around him. Those are the people who will defend him. And so he is, cultivating them to be his safety net. All right. I believe that's what's going on. That's why Bannon stayed. So why did Bannon leave? I believe Bannon left because, as you heard during the week, Donald Trump would not talk to the press, kept calling. I mean, when Jim Acosta was representing the whole pool of reporters before he gave that off the rails, unhinged, psycho, denunciation of normal people and equated Nazis with normal people who would, lay down their lives to prevent Nazism and fascism from taking hold in this country. That was Bannon's work, but Bannon was supposed to, be outside by that. So what did he say to the news media? You're fake news. You're fake news, right? And why was the GOP so stinking quiet? Why didn't they say anything? Well, it's because they knew that Bannon was leaving, and they were afraid of Bannon leaving and being free to type whatever vitriol and viral crap that he will be typing about any senator that talked badly about Trump, right? Anybody. So I think Bannon left so that he could be free to go back to Breitbart and declare a two-front war on not just the press, and not just on, Democrats, but on all of Congress and all of the Senate and everybody that's around Trump right now. The General Kellys who were sent there to babysit Trump, literally babysit him. You know what General Kelly, does at the White House now? He actually makes the switchboard tell him who's calling the president, and he has a secretary vet those calls and say, why do you want to talk to the president? Who are you? What do you want to talk to him about? And Donald Trump won't have any of it. Donald Trump is using his personal cell phone to bypass the White House switchboard, which John Kelly has put himself in charge of. John Kelly has also closed the door of the Oval Office because people like Bannon and Jared and everybody else were walking in and out, and they were, partying, and they were, trashing people and getting involved in gossip and, with the president, who was very amenable to this kind of thing. And he closed the door so that they could get some work done because Trump isn't capable of doing any work. This isn't working. So, of course, General Kelly, McMaster, Jared, Ivanka, Gary Cohn, who spoke out against Donald Trump's racism this week, Steve Mnuchin, who's also a Jew, by the way. They all have got to go. And of course, I tell you, I figured out why they're not resigning. They're not resigning because pragmatic Republicans have told people like John Kelly and McMaster and Jared, okay, you're the babysitter. You have to stay there. I know that part of you wants to resign. This is a hopeless cause. This is just like the Civil War. This is a lost cause. This is just like fascism itself. It's a lost cause. I get it. But if you leave, we will have nobody there to babysit this man, and this man is unstable. So you have to stay. This is the thorn in Bannon's side. The fact that McMaster and Kelly were told, and so was Gary Cohn, and so was Mnuchin, by Congress, by the senators, you have to stay there. You have to. If you resign, we have nobody there to babysit him, and he is off the rails. There is something wrong. And until we figure out what to do, you have to stay there. This is what's killing Bannon. This is why they decided to separate. Bannon will go back to Breitbart, and what will he attack? Donald Trump? I hardly think so. Bannon will attack Congress. Bannon will attack the Senate. Why? Well, think about it. Congress, the Senate, they're the only entity in the United States that has a lower approval rating than President Donald Trump right now. So that's who they can run against. They're equally matched. Nobody likes either of them. So that's one reason. The second reason is to literally continue attacking John Kelly, McMaster, Jared, Ivanka, Gary Cohn, and Steve Mnuchin to try and force them out of the Trump circle, to try and make it so that they can't stand it anymore. And even though pragmatic Republicans are saying you have to stay there, you have to, we need a babysitter, you must do it. Breitbart is going to drag them and their reputations over the coals so hard they're going to go, it's untenable. We can't stay. We can't stay. I think that's the game, because in the end, Trump and Bannon are getting ready for 2018. And Congress, the only entity in government with a lower approval rating than Donald Trump, is who they can run against. Now, Bannon is a white supremacist. There's no question anymore that he's a white nationalist, and Breitbart had become a platform for white supremacy. They call it the alt-right. Screw that. It's fascism. Bannon hates, he wants America to be an isolationist country. He wants America to pull out of all the trade deals. He wants America to pull out of the world, basically. He wants to isolate the United States. And, this stupid interview that he gave with Robert Kuttner at the American Prospect, which is a liberal progressive magazine, no one could figure out why. Now it's absolutely obvious why. It's absolutely obvious why he is going to run against everyone around Trump. He's going to, try and force out everyone around Trump, and he is positioning Trump to run in 2018. Obviously Trump's, term won't be over, but he wants a different Congress. He wants white supremacists. That's the Judge Roy Moores of Alabama. Okay. That's the Joe Arpaio's, who they'll pardon. They want these kinds of guys, these white supremacists, to run against the regular Republicans, who for them are not racist enough, even though the Republican Party has been running a Southern strategy since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Prior to that, the Republican Party talked a good game about, free men but they literally switched places with the Democrats after the Civil Rights Act. They went, oh my God, you're really going to do it? You're really going to desegregate? You're really going to integrate schools? Okay. And the last Dixiecrat, the last Democrat to be a racist before they flipped, was George Wallace. And if you need to know what the Republicans admired, it was the George Wallace. Don't let the segregation happen. And then they switched places. So ever since the 1960s, the Republicans have become the racists. And Steve Bannon doesn't think they're racist enough. And so he's going to use Breitbart and other media not to trash Trump. I don't think he's going after Donald Trump. I think he still sees Donald Trump as a useful idiot and a useful tool and a great salesman of white supremacy. I think Steve Bannon is trying to go, he's going outside the White House to open up the second front in the war for fascism. Steve Bannon is a fascist, and Steve Bannon likes Gorka, and Steve Bannon likes Steve Miller, and Steve Bannon likes all this white supremacy. And Steve Bannon is just, creating a new front. And that's it. That's all. There's really nothing to celebrate here. Nothing at all. If I'm right. If I'm wrong, Bannon you'll start to see Bannon being booked on, Rachel Maddow. And he will be treated with kid gloves just to get dirt on Donald Trump. I cannot imagine that's what Bannon is doing. I just cannot imagine it. This is a guy who sat in media, not just Breitbart, but also on Sirius XM. They won't give me a show, but they sure will give a white supremacist a show. And they did. They gave Steve Bannon a show. Yeah, Dave G. We're going in a different direction. That's why I go, why can't I come back on Sirius? We're going in a different direction. Yeah, we're going in a different direction. and Bannon shows up on Sirius XM, and he's interviewing Trump through the whole freaking thing. All these media outlets help create this monster, and Steve Bannon wants to go back to media where he can continue to build the monster. That is what I think is going on, and that is why Steve Bannon gave his resignation on August 7th, but then Charlottesville happened, and he said, all right, let me guide the president through this, make sure he's sufficiently, got the white, the white nationalists, the fascists, the Nazis, the vanguard people. Let me make sure that all the Pepe freaks are all on board, and then I'll go back to media. And that's why Trump keeps talking about what, real fact-checking media is fake. And he's going to put all of his eggs into the fake media basket once again, which is how he was successful in the first place. That is what I think happened today.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, Jerry.
Dave, you are so on it. Look,
I know.
I think Bannon sees Mueller coming in too close.
Absolutely.
He got a whiff, and he's bailing because Washington, D.C. is going to be still there?
Yeah.
Oh, Washington, D.C. is going to be a crater, just like the asteroid struck it when Mueller comes out. And I think he's getting, he thinks the getting's good, so he can hide in the crowd.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, you could be right, because no one knows right now. But no, that's not my theory. My theory is Bannon is opening up the second front, which is the media front, to get the white supremacists to rally around Donald Trump so that if Mueller does, pick off, gets close to Trump and he produces evidence that clearly shows that Donald Trump has been money laundering, Russian money, dirty money, whatever for years and years, and there's articles of impeachment that are drafted. Donald Trump will be Donald Trump will become their hero. The white supremacists will rally around Donald Trump. This is why the white supremacists love Russia. They love Russia. The whole I'm Russia. They have no idea what they're exalting, but they love Russia.
They're traitors.
Right. And so what Steve Bannon is doing is he's preparing all the white supremacists to die for Donald Trump, to catch him when he falls. You understand?
Yeah.
Am I being clear?
I saw Patriot Nurse today.
I don't know what he's talking about. Personally, this is just a second front, okay? I don't think Bannon's going to turn on Donald Trump. And if he does, ever so mildly, don't fall for it right away. Let's see if he goes in full frontal. If he goes in full frontal against Donald Trump, really does start, screaming and yelling that Donald Trump is insane and he's unstable and he's got to be impeached, that would be an indication that I am completely and utterly wrong. He takes a couple of shots at him and says he's surrounded himself with globalists, or he's surrounded himself with people that, have this interventionist foreign policy, or he's surrounded himself with people I don't like, or people that are counterintuitive to our mission. That's one thing. So that's what I'm looking for.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. NAFTA renegotiations started Wednesday morning at Washington, D.C.'s Marriott Hotel, but corporate voices dominate at the negotiation table. And the actual text of the rules being renegotiated is classified information, shutting out the public. The AFL-CIO's Celeste Drake is at the NAFTA renegotiation table for working people. She says working people need a complete rewriting of NAFTA rules to eliminate the corporate domination. That's because NAFTA's real problem for working people is that it elevates principles of mobility of capital and protection of corporate profit above all other values. Drake says one example is the ISDS, Investor-State Dispute Settlement provisions that create private courts for investors to settle their disputes by essentially suing nations whenever profits or capital mobility are impeded by democratic governance or policies. She says for NAFTA to really work for working people, that core corporate privilege must be removed.
That's exactly right. So you take that out, that special privilege, and that doesn't mean that foreign investors are not protected. They still would have rights, and they should pursue those rights.
Drake says the U.S. Trade Representative wants to move very fast and have NAFTA renegotiation wrapped up by December. She says that's too fast to really renegotiate a working family-friendly NAFTA. The AFL-CIO is urging a slower, more deliberate and careful process.
We are much more likely to come closer to achieving our goals if time is spent making this a good, deliberative, pro-worker thing, not a quick and dirty negotiation that's just going to create more pro-corporate rules behind closed doors.
Trump's Strategy and Policy Forum and the Manufacturing Council both disbanded as business leaders expressed furious disagreement with Trump equating Nazis with anti-Nazi protesters in Charlottesville. Before the councils suddenly disbanded, AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka joined several CEOs leaving the councils in protest over Trump's weak response to the Nazis who murdered Heather Heyer for opposing them in the streets. Trumka's AFL-CIO statement said in part, quote, "We cannot sit on a council for a president who tolerates bigotry and domestic terrorism. We must resign on behalf of America's working people who reject all notions of legitimacy of these bigoted groups." End quote. The news is brought to you by Impact, the Ironworker Management Progressive Action Cooperative Trust. Impact's mission is more jobs for contractors and for ironworker members. You can become an ironworker in Washtenaw Community College's pre-apprenticeship program. Finish 24 credits at your own pace and become an Ironworker Local 25 apprentice. Earn while you learn. Apply now at wccnet.edu.iron. That's wccnet.edu.iron. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Hey, Progressive Voices listeners, I'm Rebecca Vallis, host of Off Kilter here on the Progressive Voices Network. This week, we went to Atlanta, Georgia for Netroots Nation, and I sat down with Randy Bryce, the guy who is challenging Paul Ryan and trying to unseat him in Congress. Let's take a listen. So you're known as actually being kind of a working guy's guy. That's a lot of the press that you've gotten, and that makes you very different as sort of a political persona and a political individual than Paul Ryan, who in many ways is sort of the opposite of that. I'm curious to hear you speak a little bit about your district and what people in the district that you're fighting to represent think about Paul Ryan and what kind of reception you've had in challenging him.
Well, it's been it's overwhelming working class district, and there's there are cities, the urban population areas, and then in between there's a good rural population too. A lot of farmlands that I pass to get to the freeway to go north, that's where my job site is. But the big thing I hear about is healthcare, and it's not just what they're doing now. I mean, first of all, they've had over 7 years to have some kind of alternative in place to just. All they're doing is repealing. They don't have any plan to replace. They're even talking about, well, let's just take it away. Basically, let's just take it away, and we'll worry about something later. And I mean, that it's all tied in with tax reform, which is part of this, and I refer to it as wealth care. It's not health care. It's wealth care, because you're going to have millionaires that are going to be getting more money. That's the trade-off. Everything politically is like trading off. It's you get something, and somebody gets something in return. So they're taking away basic health care, which, I mean, for my son, that's me worrying about him going on a sled ride down the hill in the wintertime. For me, being a cancer survivor, that's my thanks for surviving cancer is being listed as a pre-existing condition. For my mom, who's in the video, that's her independence. That's her ability to go to the grocery store, to go visit my dad who has Alzheimer's, that's living in assisted living right now. That's a huge issue. And it's not just that. I would say that's a big thing overall. Now Paul Ryan is having these captive audience town halls. I had been calling him out saying he hasn't had a public town hall in over 600 days. Well, his campaign PolitiFacted me on it.
I saw that.
So
Turns
now,
out they were wrong.
Right, so I have to correct myself. It's been over 650 days that he's had a public town.
Thanks for listening. For more Off Kilter, find us on the Progressive Voices Network and as a podcast on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at Off Kilter Show and at Facebook.com/Off Kilter Show.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
The president has not yet been able to demonstrate the stability nor some of the competence that he needs to demonstrate in order to be successful. And we need for him to be successful. Our nation needs for him to be successful. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. We need for our president, the world needs our president to be successful. He also recently has not demonstrated that he understands the character of this nation. I think our president needs to take stock of the role that he plays in our nation and move beyond himself, move way beyond himself, and move to a place where daily he's waking up thinking about what is best for our nation.
Senator Bob Corker is saying that the president needs to be successful. He needs to be functional, And then he actually said that the president isn't stable. He actually said, he sounded like your fourth grade teacher trying to explain to your parents that as gently as possible that their child is a bully and a moron. Do you know? I mean, I don't know how you tell a parent that as a teacher, maybe some teachers, but he's like, Donald does not play well with others. He hits and he hurts the other children, and he won't stop talking about the Electoral College and this giant inaugural that he had, which was not very big at all. And, but the idea that, Senator Bob Corker said, well, he's recently demonstrated that he doesn't understand the character of the recently. He's recently what is with the recently? And you could tell how carefully he was picking his words, okay? Because he knows what's going on. Bob Corker knows what's going on. This is not recently. I mean, this is the same crap that Donald Trump was spewing when Donald Trump was asking Bob Corker to be his vice president. And Bob Corker didn't say anything about the crap he was spewing. It's just so interesting. But he said he has not demonstrated that he understands what made this nation great. No, but he does understand what gets a Republican elected in 2017, and it's racism, as we all know. So one of the most influential senators just said the president of the United States is unstable and incompetent and doesn't share our basic values. And that is not an exaggeration of what Bob Corker said. And they're shocked, I tell you. They're stunned. They're just shocked. Who knew? We all did. You did. And the reason why they're picking their words so carefully and the reason why they're treading so lightly is because they know that Steve Bannon is about to launch one of the most brutal attacks on Republicans in the House and Senate that this country has ever seen. He is Lee Atwater. He is. Unfortunately for Lee Atwater, his brain betrayed him. Lee Atwater, who actually said, as to the whole, the guy that invented the Southern strategy for Richard Nixon, who gave an interview where, he was like excited to make fun of a suicidal 16-year-old who was treated for depression with electroshock treatments. And said, well, you can't say the N-word anymore, but he actually said it. He said, you can yell N, back in the 50s, but you can't say that anymore. We're in the 80s, you can't say it anymore, and so you have to have like code words. You have to like welfare queen and tax cuts and things like that, and run commercials saying that show the white hands. You remember Jesse Helms? I don't know if you do. Jesse Helms was a senator. He was a total racist. Was a Democrat. Switched to the Republican Party as the whole party was flipping. Same with Strom Thurmond. I mean, all these guys flipped from Democrat to Republican because of the race issue. And they saw, blacks, getting all uppity and stuff and, doing really well and voting. Oh, my God. And running for office and winning. And so they switched sides after the Civil Rights Act of 64. And, Helms was one of them, and Thurman was one of them, and Lee Atwater was their strategist. He was a guy from South Carolina, and he created something called the Southern Strategy, where he told them, you start out in 1954. This is his quote. You start out in 1954 by saying, and I won't say it, N, N, N. He says, by 1968, you can't say N. That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, welfare queen, all that stuff. You get so abstract now that if you're talking about cutting taxes, you're talking about totally economic things. And a byproduct of these things is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. And that's a part of it. I'm not saying that I want to get so abstract, but it's coded. We're doing away with the racial problem one way or another. You follow me, because obviously sitting around and saying we want to cut this, we want to cut that is more abstract than even saying busing now. And it's a hell of a lot more abstract than saying NN. And this is what Bannon, globalist, and, trade and build a wall. And, there's reverse racism in the country. That's why the Civil Rights Division has to look into universities and reverse. Well, Jesse Helms had a commercial. This was a classic Lee Atwater commercial. It had, the only thing on the screen was a pair of white hands. And the white hands were in the close-up, and they were crumpling a job application. And it said the narration was something like, you needed that job. You wanted that job. That job was meant for you. But because of racial quotas, you didn't get that job. See, that's Bannon. That's what went on this week. It's not dog whistles, okay? They might call it more abstract than just coming out and yelling N, but it's not so abstract that you can't see what they're actually a drawing. I could see the drawing. And I think that's why Bannon left. So Bannon is going to be the Lee Atwater. He's always been the Lee Atwater. He believes in Lee Atwater. He believes in that kind of politics. And I think that's why he's going. And the president, it's so funny. The president obviously is out there all week long while all this is going on, saying exactly what you would expect to hear Steve Bannon say about this. The fascists are fine people. There are fine people with the Nazis. Some of them were just, protesting a statue of a slave hunter, of a guy who caused and led the charge against the United States of America, a traitor to this nation, who literally said things like, slavery is bad for white people, but it's good for black people, because the discipline that we give to black people will somehow, make them less savage than they are. And of course, this was the idea that black people got fed. They had a place to live under slavery. That's who Robert E. Lee is. And that's why people are so adamant about getting rid of these Confederate statues. They were built as an outcry to Reconstruction in the 1920s, when black people started running for office and winning. Then in the 60s, after the Civil Rights Act, people started not only running for office, but actually voting and choosing their own representation, which did not include institutionalized racist, advocates. But they keep reinventing the wheel. This is why we have voter suppression. This is why we have gerrymandering. This is why we have mass incarceration. This is why we have, sentencing disparities between the drugs that the white people do, the cocaine and the crack, the drug that the black people do. This is why when black neighborhoods were inundated with the scourge of addiction, because we introduced those unbelievably addicting drugs into those neighborhoods, with mafiosos doing it. Remember in The Godfather, there's a famous scene where they're debating whether or not they want to sell drugs. And, of course, the Don Corleone, doesn't want to do it because he's afraid he'll lose all the politicians if he gets messed up in the dirty drug business. But in the end, they decide it's probably a good business. So they say, all right, you know what we'll do? We'll sell it, but we'll only keep it in the dark neighborhoods because, and this is the quote, they're animals anyway, let them lose their souls. This is the Republican Party, okay? And when that happened, and it did happen, and when the government introduced crack in the Iran-Contra controversy. Well, it was a war, a secret war, Oliver North's war. They needed to launder all the money, and so they did it through the drug markets, okay? This is what they did. Anyway, when it became a scourge in the inner city, code for black people, dark people, they increased the penalties. And they introduced 3 strikes, you're out, so that if you were caught with a joint 3 times, you went to jail for 50 years or 25 years, okay? Life imprisonment for adolescents. They mixed the adults with the juveniles. They did all kinds of stuff. They privatized prisons most recently, right? But now you notice, and, you know, this is no slam against anybody who finds themselves in the throes of addiction. But now that you notice that drugs have gone mainstream, meaning doctors prescribe them until you're so addicted to them that you will do anything to get them, including rob, steal, you know, sell your mother's pills to get, you know, whatever it is you're looking for, whatever. Now all of a sudden that white people are afflicted. They're sick. It's a sickness. It's always been a sickness. Always. But isn't it interesting that until it hits the white community, it needs to be punished with law and order, also code. Now, when you look at what Trump did in the lead up to Bannon's quitting, this is when he started spewing out all this really racist stuff about reverse racism in the universities, and police brutality is okay, and transgender people will be banned from the military, and maybe I'll pardon Joe Arpaio, and fascists are fine people, and I did a brilliant speech. This is a signal. This is a signal. And not just the lunatic fringe, not just the fascists are getting the message. I'm getting the message. I hear what they're doing. I see what they're doing. They're just opening up a second media front because while Fox is just an echo chamber, they see them getting shaken. They see some of their people crying about what the president did. They see a crack in the door in their racist rants. And Breitbart is going to close that door. Breitbart's going to keep everybody in the dark again about facts.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force. The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
This is the top of the hour from the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Instead of commercials, you've got progressive news and interviews right here at the top of the hour.
Hello, Progressive Voices TuneIn listeners. I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week.
So there seem to be a lot of myths out there about naturopathy, and can you do a little myth busting here?
Our treatments address the root cause of the disease, so we don't suppress symptoms, which might reappear later and would make the patient need to get treated again. And also, naturopathic doctors are really excellent at preventing diseases. And since the goal is to identify and treat the cause, naturopathic doctors avoid treatments that obscure the cause by suppressing the symptoms. So rather than giving a patient a medication that treats one thing that can cause many side effects, we address any obstacle to cure they might have had, such as a bad diet or a sedentary lifestyle, and recommend herbs and supplements that will support the body but also treat the condition. We believe that the body has the innate ability to heal. So if we remove something that is preventing the body to heal, then the body will naturally heal itself.
And something else that most of us are familiar with is the idea of first do no harm. So talk about how these guidelines are employed in your own practices.
Exactly. So kind of like what I just talked about, where we identify the cause and we treat that. So first do no harm. We think, okay, what is the body needing? What is preventing the body from doing its best at living life, at doing everything that it's supposed to do? And instead of giving the person one type of medication that can cause more side effects, leading the person to take another type of medication, what we do are natural and will stimulate the body's natural healing abilities, so that the body can heal itself naturally, so we don't have to worry about giving the body other types of medication, which would lead to more side effects.
What's the barrier with being able to charge insurance?
That's mostly politics. As the medicine grows, advocacy kind of comes in, and it's mostly patient-driven as they start to pressure insurance companies and carriers to license and accept naturopathic doctors, then eventually we'll be able to contract with them.
Can you talk about the vitamin C IV therapy that I had and how it works on cancer cells?
So vitamin C, also known as ascorbic acid, is a nutrient that most humans must get from food or dietary supplements since we are not able to make it in the body. And when it's taken intravenously, so through the vein, through an IV, the body is able to tolerate much higher levels than if taken by mouth. So in high-dose vitamin C, it's been studied as a treatment for patients with cancer since the 1970s. And studies suggest that these higher levels of vitamin C may cause the death of cancer cells. So without going into further detail, the anti-cancer effect of vitamin C in different types of cancer cells involve a chemical reaction that makes a product called hydrogen peroxide in the body, which may kill cancer cells. But it's very safe for cells that are non-cancerous. And there are other studies that show that combining high-dose vitamin C with certain types of chemotherapy drugs may be more effective than just chemotherapy alone. And vitamin C is also shown to be a safe and effective therapy to improve quality of life, symptoms of fatigue, nausea, vomiting, pain, appetite loss, and many others.
Well, I have to say it really helped me going through chemotherapy.
Got a really interesting topic for discussion today, and that is Medicare Advantage. So Medicare Advantage spends less on care, so why is it costing so much?
Well, isn't that the big question for everybody? Medicare Advantage, there's a lot of folks who really like being on Medicare Advantage plans, and people could sign up to be in essentially a managed care situation with their Medicare coverage, and so it was designed to save money for the federal government, but the insurers, as we know they sometimes do, are quite crafty in finding all the ways that they can make money out of a particular plan. For instance, the government reimburses them for administration and for marketing costs, and they give them access to funds. They used to be a 14% additional payment that went to them before the Affordable Care Act started to ramp that down a little bit, but still, they're still making a lot of money.
So how many enrolled as opposed to regular Medicare, and do people really like it who are on it?
Absolutely. People really love it who are on it, because if you're just a straight Medicare patient, as many people know, you're going to have some co-pays and out-of-pocket expenses that go along with it. You're going to be covered for anything major, but you're going to have some out-of-pocket expense. So people often sign up for these because they say, hey, this is great. They're going to cover more of what I might have to pay if I get sick or if I have a chronic illness, and it's not going to cost me anything, so why not? The first clue to all of us should be that anytime an insurance company isn't charging us for something, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're getting money from somewhere.
Check out our show at nursetalksite.com and listen every Saturday and Sunday right here on Progressive Voices.
You've been listening to Top of the Hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Commercial-free interviews and exclusive progressive news and information at the top of the hour.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
Hey! It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
About that? I would echo Maggie's question. Steve Bannon is.
I never spoke to Mr. Bannon about it.
But can you tell us broadly what your? Do you still have confidence?
Well,
in
we'll
Steve?
see. Hey, look. I like Mr. Bannon. He's a friend of mine. But Mr. Bannon came on very late. You know that. I went through 17 senators, governors, and I won all the primaries. Mr. Bannon came on very much later than that. And I like him. He's a good man. He is not a racist. I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually.
Well, yeah. So that was from that unhinged press conference where he vouched for Steve Bannon's non-racist views. And of course, Steve Bannon, according to Breitbart, according to Steve Bannon, had tendered his resignation on August 7th, and this didn't happen until a week later. So the president knew Steve Bannon was going and didn't want to trash Steve Bannon because he knows Steve Bannon is not going to trash him. That is not why Steve Bannon is leaving. Steve Bannon is leaving to actually open up a second front, in my opinion. Again, no one knows, all right? And when I don't know, I don't know. I can only conclude, and then we could all place bets and see who's right. The former editor-at-large at Breitbart, he thinks that Steve Bannon felt marginalized and Steve Bannon was treated poorly and that he's going to go out now and trash Trump. I disagree. I think Steve Bannon was marginalized. I think he was treated as an also-ran because he was vindictive. He probably smelled. I mean, you know what I mean? When you look at Steve Bannon, don't you think like if he's really leaving and he's pursuing like other options that he would turn up on like a makeover show? I mean, wouldn't you want to get your paws on him and clean that son of a bitch up? Wouldn't you just want to shave him down and wash his hair? I mean, come on. He's not going to end up on some makeover show. He's not going to end up on Dancing with the Stars unless they feature the goose step as a dance. No, Steve Bannon's going back to Breitbart so Steve Bannon can run fake media and support Donald Trump and not support the people around Donald Trump who are babysitting Donald Trump, like General Kelly and H.R. McMaster. And I'm not fans of any of theirs, but I did come to the conclusion in my theoretical, explanation here, my conclusion leads me to believe that pragmatic Republicans, when I was talking to Richard Painter yesterday and he kept saying, I just want Gorka and Bannon and Steve Miller gone, that'll solve a lot of problems and everything. I'm thinking to myself as I'm talking to him, that's not going to solve anything. Trump is still Trump, and Trump is still Trump, and Bannon is still Bannon, and Bannon is going to go out there and he is going to attack the adults in the room, like McMaster. He's already started that, right? Like McMaster and like Kelly and make their lives so freaking miserable so that when Mueller gets, to the point where he's ready to tell everybody what he found by following the money, and the money is Trump's money, and following these real estate deals and following Felix Sater and Trump's Soho, which apparently he is so laser focused on. Now, for those of you who don't know, in New York, there's a neighborhood, it's called Soho. It's south of Houston Street. Okay, it's spelled Houston, but it's pronounced Houston. South of Houston Street it used to be, kind of industrial, but it's become very trendy and very expensive, and that is where Donald Trump decided to build a building, Trump Soho. And Felix Sater was raising money for this project, and it turned out that the whole thing went bankrupt. There was a lot of infighting, and Sater was later, Donald Trump should have known. Felix Sater is a Russian mob figure. To the point where, he did one of those Tommy deals, in a bar, where Tommy, it depends where Tom, is he from the casino or is he from, Goodfellas? Doesn't matter. Goodfellas, it's more, The Godfather started it with Sonny and the trash can beating. Best beating ever. Until Tommy in Goodfellas, who beats the hell out of Billy Batts because Billy told him to get his shine box, right? And so he beats him to death. I mean, just kicks him and beats him. And then in Casino, he does it with a pen, okay? He attacks a guy and he kills him with a pen to the neck. This is what Felix Sater did. He took a martini glass stem and stabbed a guy like that. Did a Tommy thing, right? So then Felix Sater was about to go to jail. Turns out Felix Sater was flipped by the FBI and works for us. So if Mueller is following Soho, he's obviously in touch with Sater, and Sater obviously has been on the inside for long enough to give information to the FBI, give information to the independent counsel. He probably has records of the money and emails and everything else. So if Mueller gets close, or not close, I'm sure he's close, but I mean, if Mueller finally comes out, and I keep saying every night before I go to bed, I thank God, right, for loving me, and I tell God I love him. And then I say, hurry up, come on, Mueller. Come on, Mueller. And then we go to sleep. But they must know it's coming. And I promise you, that Donald Trump is going to turn himself into a martyr. Listen, impeachment won't happen overnight. And like I said, the jury is out on whether you can indict a sitting president. And that would take a lot of litigation, too, to figure out. And it would have to go all the way to the Supreme Court and blah, blah. And they'd have to take their time, render their opinion. All this is going to take months. And next year is an election, okay? And during that election, Donald Trump is going to be held up as somebody who's being attacked mercilessly by the media, the fake news. And he's going to be somebody that they're going to hold up and say he's being attacked by Congress, especially the House. And remember, every one of those 435 members of Congress, they all have to run again. Every last one of them. They have to run every 2 years. They will all be on the ballot in 2018. Now, only a third of the Senate will be on the ballot, but every House member, and that is where impeachment starts, in the House. So they're going to position Donald Trump with Steve Bannon's help as being more popular than Congress, and that Congress is the impediment. Hence, he's attacked Mitch McConnell already. Not that McConnell's on the ballot. And he's holding Mitch McConnell's wife hostage, Elaine Chao, right? She's our transportation secretary. You realize that hardly anybody even noticed this, but during that off-the-rails, crazy, unhinged, racist, ranting press conference, Elaine Chao was standing right next to the president. Now, everybody was focused on Kelly Winsing and Roy Cohn. Gary Cohn, probably related, wincing and, Mnuchin, twitching and all this stuff, right? But on the other side was Elaine Chao. And when Donald Trump was finished with this crazy racist, defense for the Nazis, who some were fine people, by the way. There are some fine Nazis out there. He handed it over to Elaine Chao, who continued with the infrastructure thing. And all that was an executive order, something about permitting, okay, easing, the process for it did absolutely nothing at all for this infrastructure package, because he doesn't have an infrastructure package, just like he doesn't have a tax plan, just like he didn't have a health care plan. He's got nothing. He's got goose egg, zero, nothing, zip, zero. And so that's what that dog and pony show was about. It was, after all, Infrastructure Week or something. What was it? Michelangelo in Boulder.
Hi, Randy.
Hey.
Randy, I go way back to the 60s. And I know I'm reading about this guy in New York and everything, and actually working for a big contractor back there who he stiffed. Took him 6 years just to get not even a quarter of the money that this guy owed him. The people that lost jobs, he doesn't care about people's jobs or anything else, that he wants to bring jobs back or anything else. He never had.
I got news for you. This whole idea that if we had full employment, which we do, that, anything below 4% is full employment, but that if we had full employment, then racism would just fade away. You know what I did this week? I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I looked at the employment numbers through the 50s, okay, when everything was segregated still, right? We had like 2.9% unemployment in this country, and it didn't solve the racial problem, and it never will. What will solve the racial problem is talking about the racial problem, taking down these monuments of intimidation that send a message to every person of color in this country: white people are in charge. Doing something about the justice system, doing something about the way we police communities, going back to community-based policing, getting away from police brutality, making hate speech illegal in this country until such time as it doesn't have an effect on people anymore, because it's only something you read about in history books.
But hey, history. Why don't we call his history fake history? Because basically that's what it is. It's fake history.
Well,
let me tell you. He's been the type of person, and I remember this from way back when, from Studio 54. He'd come in with an entourage of people. More than half of those people were bodyguards and stuff. He's going to be there with some of his own people. I forget who the owner was. A good friend of Roy Cohn's, the owner of Studio 54. But I remember, 4 or 5.
Rubel. Wasn't it Dave Rubel or? Steve Rubel.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and after I read The Art of the Deal, and you can see right there the guy has always had this tact of distraction, of subterfuge, of lying bold-facedly, of half-truths and everything to distract, so he can keep sailing ahead, and he leaves his people behind and all, and he's out there until the storm front, and I hate to use that, but the storm front comes right at him, and then he surrounds himself with people. He's always been a coward. He's always been a bully. Everyone knows that. And yet today, we still have people that are saying, well, he didn't know. He's a rookie at this.
That's Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan. Oh, well,
And the media. And, I'm on the media all the time. So there's only a handful of yous out there, like you and, other people, Tom Hartman and all, that are getting this across, and here we are. We are the small little revolutionary, the Continental Army going against the British Army of these just totally treasonous, unpatriotic. They're not Americans and all that. I'm going to.
They're all globalists. I mean, in the worst way, meaning they just look around the globe to see globalists. Well, no, they look around the world to see who's in need of laundering money, and then they endear themselves to those people, right. And they take their dirty money and they try to make it clean for them, and that's how they survive. They appeal to the grimiest, slimiest, most thuggish, sleaziest. I've said this. He's addicted to sleaze. He loves sleazy people.
He is. He's a Times Square guy from the 1960s. Let's put it that way. I will give you one little humorous thing here. Now what we have to do is go after the sebaceous gherkin, Sebastian Gorka. That's what we got to do. And Mueller. And all. Get those guys out. It's not going to solve a lot.
It's not going to solve anything. As long as Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and as long as Donald Trump is the president, then this is what it's going to look like, sound like, smell like, feel like. This is what it's going to be. This man is unhinged. The man is unstable, and he is attracted to every sleazy person on this planet because he feels like people who are dirty and sleazy and do illegal things have money that they need cleaned, and he knows just how to do it.
Right, exactly. And that's how they make their...
And so it doesn't really matter who's around him. Bannon, this is where Bannon is, he's so brilliant. He's an idiot because all Steve Bannon is going to be able to do is get a soft landing for this man on the white nationalists' bellies and on their asses, okay? Which is what he's trying to do. However, Donald Trump is still going to go. He's not going to make it. Right.
Exactly.
And there's a guy in Indiana who's going to owe me a dinner at Ruth's Chris.
Thank you, Randy. Have a good one. Be safe out there.
I will. No, I'm serious about this. There's no way this man's making it for you, and there was no way he could, because while Bob Corker thinks this is a recent development that Trump is a racist, listen. That he will play the race card, that he will divide people along racial and religious Jews. And today, by the way, he says he's going to sign another executive order to ban contraception from Obamacare plans to preserve religious freedom.
To speak to Randy, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Big protein, big flavor, big packs, little carbs. That's why my favorite snack is Herky Jerky. But you can't get the best stuff at the gas station or even in the supermarket. You have to order it online from the best purveyors of jerky I've ever found. Herky Jerky. Herky Jerky is the official snack of the Randi Rhodes Air Force, and it comes in elk, buffalo, beef, bacon, oh yes, bacon, hot, mild, or 14 other incredible flavors. And for the month of August, not only on the 4 new flavors, new beef jerky, but $5 off on all of the full pack products, the bacon, the venison, the buffalo, and the elk. It's Herky Jerky's 9-month celebration with the Randi Rhodes Show, and the Herky Jerky owners would like to thank all of the loyal customers who have supported us because they are a small business. So are we, and we are very grateful. Free shipping as always when you order 2 packs or more of beautiful venison, beef, buffalo, bacon, elk in big bulk packs. You get your money's worth and $5 off of all the full pack products. Just visit herkyjerky.com and enter promo code August.
Hello, Progressive Voices tune-in listeners. I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week.
Medicare Advantage spends less on care, so why is it costing so much?
Well, isn't that the big question for everybody? Medicare Advantage, there's a lot of folks who really like being on Medicare Advantage plans, and they originally were designed to really save the government money because people could sign up to be in essentially a managed care situation with their Medicare coverage.
So how many enrolled as opposed to regular Medicare, and do people really like it who are on it?
Absolutely. People really love it who are on it. And I've heard reports vary on how many people in raw numbers are on the plan, but there are as many as, 30-40% of the people who are on the Medicare program, whether that's disabled people or whether that's people who are more standard Medicare eligible, sign up for these Medicare Advantage plans because they would like to have access to a little bit cheaper out-of-pocket costs for themselves. Because if you just are a straight Medicare patient, as many people know, you're going to have some co-pays and out-of-pocket expenses that go along with it. You're going to be covered for anything major, but you're going to have some out-of-pocket expense. So people often sign up for these because they say, hey, this is great. They're going to cover more of what I might have to pay if I get sick or if I have a chronic illness, and it's not going to cost me anything, so why not? The first clue to all of us should be that any time an insurance company isn't charging us for something, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're getting money from somewhere.
Check out our show at nursetalksite.com and listen every Saturday and Sunday right here on Progressive Voices.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randy, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Remember, this is the George Wallace of segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Oh, God.
And George Wallace pretty much became the candidate of the Ku Klux Klan.
Segregation became his platform, and that's how he stayed in office, because he knew that he could stoke that fire and get people behind him. Because of the way this happened, he has culpability for things that happened in the state. And not acting when things took place, not jumping in, has stained his legacy, rightfully. It is because of the lawlessness that he allowed to take place that a lot of people blame him as well for the bombing of that church.
And you can just look back to the Friday before September 15th, 1963, when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed. A reporter asked him on the Friday before that Sunday, Governor Wallace, what needs to happen for the civil rights problems to end in Alabama? And Governor Wallace retorted back, well, what we need are a couple of first-class funerals.
Holy crap, man. And he was a Democrat. That was the end of Democrats being pro-racist. George Wallace ran as president as an independent. He left the Democratic Party, and the party started to flip. After LBJ passed the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 65, the Democratic Party became the party of civil rights, and the Republican Party became the party against civil rights. And it's been like that for the last 50 years. That's our history. Prior to that, the Republicans were the Democrats. The Republicans believed in, freeing black slaves. Lincoln was a Republican, and all that history, right up until 1964 had the Republicans on the right side of history. After the Civil Rights Act, LBJ, a senator from Texas becomes president after JFK is assassinated, somebody nobody even elected to be the president, and he has the temerity to pass civil rights legislation. A freaking Democrat from Texas passes civil rights voting, the Voting Rights Act and civil rights, legislation to desegregate and end Jim Crow era black codes. Well, that was just a bridge too far. And so Wallace became an independent, and, the rest is history. Democrats switched sides with the Republicans, and the Republicans became, their entire mission in life was to undo the Civil Rights Act. And that's why gerrymandering, that's why voter suppression, that's why, the new Jim Crow laws, which is mass incarceration through the justice system. That's why. I mean, they just flip. And for the last 50, 60 years, and so when people tell you, well, Lincoln, it's the party of bull crap. Lincoln would have been a Democrat today. Okay, there's just no question about it. But back then, Democrats were, the repulsive ones. They were hideous people. And then when the South started to see black people free, and they started to see black people vote, and they started to see black people winning, that's when they started with black codes, and that's when they started with segregation and Jim Crow laws and all that. And we lived with that for almost 100 years. I mean, I don't think people understand how long this has been going on. Now, I bring this up, for two reasons. I want to show you what a modern Democratic president. Oh, I'm missing one. No, I'm not. I want to show you what a modern Democratic president... Yeah, you got scared, didn't you, Scott? I want to show you what a modern Democratic president looks like and sounds like when he seriously addresses issues of race.
But for all those who scratched and clawed their way to get a piece of the American dream, there were many who didn't make it. Those who were ultimately defeated in one way or another by discrimination. That legacy of defeat was passed on to future generations. Those young men and increasingly young women who we see standing on street corners or languishing in our prisons without hope or prospects for the future. Even for those blacks who did make it, questions of race and racism continue to define their worldview in fundamental ways. For the men and women of reverent rights generation, the memories of humiliation and doubt and fear have not gone away, nor is the anger and the bitterness of those years. That anger may not get expressed in public, in front of white coworkers or white friends, but it does find voice in the barbershop or the beauty shop, around the kitchen table. At times, that anger is exploited by politicians to gin up votes along racial lines or to make up for a politician's own failings. And occasionally, it finds voice in the church on Sunday morning, in the pulpit and in the pews. The fact that so many people are surprised to hear that anger in some of Reverend Wright's sermons simply reminds us of the old truism that the most segregated hour of American life occurs on Sunday morning. That anger is not always productive. Indeed, all too often it distracts attention from solving real problems. It keeps us from squarely facing our own complicity within the African American community in our own condition. It prevents the African American community from forging the alliances it needs to bring about real change. But the anger is real. It is powerful. And to simply wish it away, to condemn it without understanding its roots, only serves to widen the chasm of misunderstanding that exists between the races.
Okay. Thank you, as a white person, for explaining this to me. What about the white people? Because, Wanda Sykes had the best joke about Obama at the beginning of his presidency. She said, if he succeeds, he'll be white. And if he fails, he'll be black. So that means that he's mixed race. So here's Obama addressing the bitterness and the anger on the other side.
In fact, a similar anger exists within segments of the white community. Most working and middle-class white Americans don't feel that they've been particularly privileged by their race. Their experience is the immigrant experience. As far as they're concerned, no one handed them anything. They've built it from scratch. They've worked hard all their lives, many times only to see their jobs shipped overseas or their pensions dumped after a lifetime of labor. They are anxious about their futures, and they feel their dreams slipping away. And in an era of stagnant wages and global competition, opportunity comes to be seen as a zero-sum game in which your dreams come at my expense. So when they are told to bus their children to a school across town, when they hear an African American is getting an advantage in landing a good job or a spot in a good college because of an injustice that they themselves never committed, when they're told that their fears about crime in urban neighborhoods are somehow prejudice, resentment builds over time. Like the anger within the black community, these resentments aren't always expressed in polite company, but they have helped shape the political landscape for at least a generation. Mm-hmm. Anger over welfare and affirmative action helped forge the Reagan coalition. Politicians routinely exploited fears of crime for their own electoral ends. Talk show hosts and conservative commentators built entire careers unmasking bogus claims of racism while dismissing legitimate discussions of racial injustice and inequality as mere political correctness or reverse racism.
It's all back.
And just as black anger often proved counterproductive, so have these white resentments distracted attention from the real culprits of the middle-class squeeze. A corporate culture rife with inside dealing, and questionable accounting practices, and short-term greed. A Washington dominated by lobbyists and special interests. Mm-hmm. Economic policies that favor the few over the many. And yet to wish away the resentments of white Americans, to label them as misguided or even racist, without recognizing they are grounded in legitimate concerns, this too widens the racial divide and blocks the path to understanding.
That's what it sounds like when you're serious about talking to the country about race. The exploitation of melanin. Really, that's really where we're at. But the use of a difference in melanin for political advantage while you're stealing from everybody. You create chaos between people. Chaos. You choose sides. In chaos, you can steal. And that's what's going on in this country. And it's all back. You know, it's almost as if the lights were on when Obama was president. The lights were on, and it became, just like it did after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it became a losing proposition to say N, right? It became a losing proposition to play the race card. It became a losing proposition to say, one group was morally or mentally superior to another group. You were shunned, you were laughed at, you were marginalized, you were put in a corner because you were full of crap. But when Obama left, the lights went out again. And when the lights go out, cockroaches can come out of the darkness and they can do their thing. And the cockroaches are out. And that is why I keep saying, if there's a crack of light, if you can open the door just enough to get a crack of light in, the cockroaches will go back under their hoods. They won't disappear, but they'll go back to a place hiding behind a wall. You know they're there. I know they're there. But I'm not going to get post-traumatic stress syndrome because they're crawling on me while I'm sleeping. That is the difference between a president, whether you agreed with his policies or not. Although I will tell you, his policies took unemployment from 10% to 4%. And this is another little peach, okay? Lying about Trump's success with the economy.
Brad, hold on a second, Brad, hold on. Yes. You're talking to financial journalists, right? I don't know if I didn't know you were going to bring this up, so I don't have the chart ready, but we always put it on. I can find it and I can tweet it out to you. This market started going up on March 9th, 2009, and if you have a ruler, it's a pretty much straight line from there to now. So there is nothing Donald Trump has done to cause the market to be where it is right now.
And President Trump would like tax reform to get it done, but those who are working on it have said the president is doing nothing to advance that agenda. And look at those CEOs that are on that council who walked away from
Stephanie,
him.
I want him to answer my question, because you guys keep peddling this myth that Donald Trump is responsible for this market. You are a market guy. You have seen the S&P 500 since March 9th, 2009, right?
Absolutely.
So do you give Barack Obama credit for all of the stuff that happened from March 9th, 2009 to January 20th, 2017?
The number one driver of this
Answer the
stock
question,
market,
Brad. Answer the question, Brad.
And what is the question?
Do you give Barack Obama the credit for all the stuff that happened from March 9th, 2009 to January 20th, 2017? Because if you do that, then you realize it's not Donald Trump.
Look, right now, the commander-in-chief is Donald J. Trump.
You see what I mean? We had a brilliant president. We had a guy who took us off the economic cliff that the previous Republican president took us into. And took unemployment. We were bleeding, 800,000 jobs every single month, and turned it all around and gave some sort of a national exchange to purchase health care with subsidies for those who needed it without being discriminated against for being a woman or for having a pre-existing condition or whatever. That was an amazing couple of achievements, and Donald Trump is trying to take credit for one of them that he has nothing to do with, and the other he was going to solve by taking health care away from millions of people. That was his answer. We're in bad shape, there's no question. People have cried all week long, on TV, off TV, in our bedrooms, in our homes, and they'll cry this weekend in church. There are 9 more rallies scheduled over this weekend. I would beg people not to show up at all. Don't even waste your breath, because these people see themselves as victims, and there's nothing you can say that's going to make them feel any better.
To speak to Randi, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Yeah, you could buy tile at a chain store if you wanted to. You could wait for a kid to try and answer your questions about what's this made of, or how do I install it, or what's in stock. But what if you wanted serious craftsmanship? What if you wanted custom design, handmade, to order from your imagination, or an inspiration photo that you love? Probably you think you can't anymore, but I did. When it was time to shop tile, I came across a family-owned business that still handcrafts each and every individual tile, matching your colors, your inspiration, your design. Tempus Tile Works. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and they still handcraft the most magnificent tile. Let them match to your fabrics or to your countertops or to anything you can envision for your bath or kitchen. Teeny tiny tiles to oversized, their art or yours. It's all doable, it's all affordable, and it's all individually made just for your project. Visit Tempus Tile Works and look at their amazing gallery of designs and styles, and give up the chain stores. Tempus Tile Works, custom made. TempusTileWorks.com.
This is the voice of the resistance. You're listening to the Progressive Voices Network.
This is Ezra Levin, Executive Director of Indivisible. Please go to indivisibleguide.com, type in your zip code, find your local Indivisible group, and join the movement to resist Trump's agenda. We've teamed up with Progressive Voices Network to help your community take action and hold Congress accountable.
Donald Trump is the biggest popular vote loser in history to ever call himself president-elect. He will attempt to use his congressional majority to reshape America in his own racist, authoritarian, and corrupt image. If progressives are going to stop this, we must stand indivisibly opposed to Trump and the members of Congress, or MOCs, who would do his bidding. Together, we have the power to resist. And we have the power to win. We know this because we've seen it before. The authors of this guide are former congressional staffers who witnessed the rise of the Tea Party. We saw these activists take on a popular president with a mandate for change and a supermajority in Congress. We saw them organize locally and convince their own MOCs to reject President Obama's agenda. Their ideas were wrong, cruel, and tinged with racism. And they won. We believe that protecting our values, our neighbors, and ourselves will require mounting a similar resistance to the Trump agenda, but a resistance built on the values of inclusion, tolerance, and fairness. Trump is not popular. He does not have a mandate. He does not have large congressional majorities. If a small minority in the Tea Party can stop President Obama, then we, the majority, can stop a petty tyrant named Trump.
Take action and hold Congress accountable. This is Ezra Levin on the Progressive Voices Network, asking you to join the millions who decided to become part of the movement to resist Trump's agenda. Check out indivisibleguide.com to start resisting on your home turf. Keep listening for more ways you can get involved.
This is the voice of the resistance. You're listening to the Progressive Voices Network. Your favorite Progressive Voices shows and your favorite hosts are available anytime, anywhere on demand. Fully searchable on the PV app, SoundCloud, iTunes, and ProgressiveVoices.com. Randi Rhodes, Nicole Sandler's What's News, The Coffee Cast, Green News Reporter, Pterodactyl, they're all there whenever you want to listen, on demand 24/7. The Corral Cast, Off Kilter, Nurse Talk, Breaking Through, Laura Flanders, dozens more, updated daily and fully searchable on ProgressiveVoices.com and the PV app. Your choice, your schedule, on demand from Progressive Voices.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
He doesn't like the idea that some people keep dwelling on the past. Once again, that bar stool, unsophisticated person, or what a 12-year-old would think. Let the past go. He doesn't understand how the past extends into the present. He doesn't understand what an unpleasant symbol might mean because he is not a victim to one of them, being of the ethnicity that he is. And so, for him, he sees that the statues are pretty. And I suppose in the aesthetic sense, you could say that they are. And he doesn't want them torn down. He doesn't understand that those statues stand for people who fought to keep black people in chains. Now, for him, of course, that just means let's not go back to the past. But for most of us, it means a great deal more. And for him, he simply doesn't understand significance. Here's what it comes down to. So, where's it going to go? Where's it going to stop? You can hear somebody saying this over a Guinness. This is such an ordinary thing. Where's it going to stop? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson did some pretty great things other than being slaveholders in a time when almost nobody was questioning it. With Robert E. Lee, what it comes down to very simply is, what did he get us? And so he fought the Civil War. I hear he was nice. Frankly, most people are nice. What did he get us? What he did was he fought to keep you and me's ancestors in slavery. And really, that's it. I can't wait for the historians to come up with all of this trivia. But that's all that he did. And it would never occur to Donald Trump that that's the difference between George Washington and Robert E. Lee.
I'm surprised that he likes him because, you know, Robert E. Lee's a loser.
That was beautiful, Don Lemon. That was really good. Yeah. I mean, this man was always about winning, and now he's like devoted to the greatest losers, Hitler and Confederate generals and the Old South. I mean, these are the biggest losers ever, and that's why the white supremacists feel like victims, because they have the shame of loss and losing their, plantation culture that they dreamt of. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But, I can't explain Donald Trump to you except that he's political about his racism, right? In that, the Confederacy and the love for it and the flying of the flag and the erection of statues. It was a very regional thing, and Donald Trump is from Queens. So with him, it's purely divisive. With him, it's purely, his lack of understanding of what makes this country great. And, his lack of empathy for people who were slaughtered, whether they were on the Union side or the Confederate side. I mean, he has no empathy for anybody. I mean, but to worship the loser that caused 600,000, almost 1 million Americans were killed in the Civil War. You understand that? Like 600,000 when our population was limited to a handful of states. It's unbelievable. And think about this. Arizona has Confederate statues. They weren't even part of the Union. You're telling me that was a heritage that they felt strongly about? They didn't even have the heritage. No, it's racial. It's racial. It was part of Jim Crow. It was part of the black codes. You stick statues at the courthouse. You name schools after Confederate generals. You start the Ku Klux Klan as a response to blacks running for office and winning. They were winning, and that's when the Ku Klux Klan formed. What was his name? Bedford Forrest. From Forrest Gump, right? He was a Confederate general, and he's the person that actually invented and created the Ku Klux Klan. This guy was a Confederate general. It's unbelievable to me. And they're all losers, and they feel that. That's why they all feel like victims. Sick, sad, as Trump would say. Jennifer in Sacramento.
Hey, Randy, I was listening to you yesterday, and you were talking towards the end after you were talking to Richard Painter, and it was starting to come to me that, yes, you're right. There are militias out throughout the United States loaded up with guns, and they're just waiting for that cause. They're waiting for that.
That's right.
The word to go. And when you said that yesterday, I went, oh, my God, you're right.
Yeah.
Now, this morning with Bannon, I'm going, you're right. Bannon's going to go out there, stoke that fire, continue to nurture them and tell them that they're right and they need to be ready. And at the same time, warn the Republicans that Trump has an army and he will use it, and he will use it against them.
That's it.
And he will use it. Yes.
That's it. That's exactly it. So this is what I'm trying to say, and those are better words than I had. Okay, you're right. I mean, these people will go to war, and Donald Trump will be their Confederate general. I mean, there's just no question about it. And this is part of the rhetoric that you hear from Donald Trump, where he says, "I am your voice. Only I can fix it," and also, calling news fake news, and the idea that he was out there after Bannon gave his resignation, saying they're trying to take me away from you. Remember that? Where he said, they're just trying to cheat you out of my white supremacist presidency. They're trying to cheat you. That's what the Russia investigation is. They're trying to cheat you.
Yes, and Mueller, he's right on the trail,
yes.
and he's getting too close, so they have to act now. So stoke the flames, get the fire going, get these people riled up and ready to go with all their millions of guns. I mean, it's frightening. All those people had guns.
You know what's interesting?
To them.
I mean, I was looking into, the Second Amendment, quelling the First Amendment or chilling the First Amendment, however you want to put it. And the answer to that is clearly yes, and that we have to come up with a different analysis when free speech is accompanied by semi-automatic weapons. But then I went even further and I started to research how many guns there are in America and, where are they? Most people in America own fewer guns now than they used to. But the people who do own guns own more guns than they used to. The average gun owner owns 8 guns.
Oh, my God.
I know. So while most Americans are saying, I don't want a gun, I got kids in the house, it's, just the presence of a gun increases the chances of it, causing some damage. I'll put in a blink system, or I'll get an alarm system or whatever it is. I don't need a stinking gun, blah, blah, blah. I got 911 on my speed dial. You press a button and, life alert will come, whatever. So there's I don't really want a gun. But the people who do want guns have more guns than they've ever had, and the guns that they have are more powerful than they've ever been.
Yeah, there are these semi-automatic weapons.
Yeah,
why anyone needs a machine gun, I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know.
You can't hunt with a machine gun unless you're a surgeon. You know what I mean? Unless you're really a surgeon. But honest to God, this makes it makes perfect sense. Although to normal people, it makes no sense. But you're right. The militias are ready. They need a leader. They haven't had one. Donald Trump is perfect for this. Steve Bannon will be the Goebbels. He'll be the communications guy, the propaganda meister, and they will be told as soon as Mueller steps up to the plate and says, "Here's what I have. This is what he's done. It's up to the Congress to take action. I'm not here. You can't prosecute a sitting president, so it's up to you guys to do it." That's when they will start with that. They're cheating you out of what is rightfully yours. They're cheating you of your heritage. They're cheating you of your history. They're cheating you of the ability to turn back the tide of diversity.
Yeah.
Oh, this is
well, Randi. Just please keep going with this message because you have been dead on.
I know
this whole time.
I always was.
This whole time.
I always was. I always was. It's just an instinct I have. It's not that I'm smarter than anybody else. It's just I work very hard and I do look at the connective tissue between all the stories and I draw, conclusions based on my past history of doing this for how many years and knowing where people are really coming from. This whole thing, for instance, with contraception, okay, that goes back to eugenics. The reason why they want to close Planned Parenthood is not because of cancer screenings and not because of, abortions, which is like a tiny percentage of the services they provide. It's because of contraception. Ever since white people have been able to get contraception at a fair price or covered by their insurance, the birth rate has fallen. The birth rate has fallen. And these white supremacists understand that by 2042, America will not be a majority white country. It will be a very diverse country of interbred and interracial and people from all over the brown parts of the world. And this is what they feel victimized by. And so if you took away contraception, there might be a baby boom. It's Hitler stuff, okay? Where you give awards for the mother who has 8 kids into the, and hands them over to the Reich.
Wow.
It's all connected in their ridiculous minds.
Well, that's the best explanation I've heard for why they've been suddenly now in 2017 trying to prevent
contraception
and have. Yeah. Why does Hobby Lobby care if I'm? I would think they would want me not get pregnant so I could continue to work and not go on maternity leave. It makes no sense. That makes sense.
Right. It's listen, and normal people, good people, decent people, happy people, family people, religious people, they don't feel this way. They don't even think of these things. It's because my nose is buried in these right-wing websites and my nose is buried in these chat rooms where I get kicked out all the time the second I post. But I mean, I go in there and I look at what they this was the dog whistle of Cosmopolitan. This is today when he's backed up against the wall and he's trying to send a message to the uber Nazis. He comes up with an idea about keeping contraception from being covered on insurance that's sold on the exchange. And I go, oh my God, these are all code words for the racists. It's all code words for them. They get it. And they know that Bannon didn't leave, that Bannon left, but he's not trashing Trump. They know that Bannon is leaving so that he can support Trump from a second front.
Yes.
And Bannon can get rid of the babysitters, the General Kellys, the General McMasters, the Ivanka, anybody who tweeted against, this racist stuff. Okay, McMaster said it was the total definition of terrorism, right? Kelly was wincing when he had this off-the-hook press conference. So now Bannon is outside, and he's going to attack all the adults in the room so that Donald Trump will be surrounded by more Nazis and more white supremacists. Maybe Newt Gingrich will go. Maybe Rudy Giuliani will go into the White House. I mean, they're trying to purge all the adults out of the White House. And that's what Bannon's next mission is. To denigrate them and to call into, he's going to go do some deep research and find out, that one time, God forbid, it doesn't really matter to me, but that, let's say General Kelly was in a foxhole one time and he took a dick pic and it's on his phone. Do you know what I'm saying? Or they'll make it up if it never happened. I'm telling you, that's where we're going with this.
Wow.
And it's all because Mueller's getting close. There's no question in my mind.
Oh, none of mine either. He's on it, and they know it.
I know.
And they have to do something quick, and that's why it's getting crazy.
Yeah, you're right.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Have a good weekend. Daryl in Phoenix.
Hello, Randy. How you doing?
I'm good.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, I was listening to your podcast, and you were playing some blurbs from Fox News or whatever, and they mentioned the fact that General Grant owned a slave. Well, had they mentioned the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, they would have mentioned that General Grant freed that man in 1859. You know, the same year Robert E. Lee suppressed the rebellion started by John Brown at Harper's Ferry.
And that's how Robert E. Lee got to be a Civil War guy in the first place. That's where he met, I think he met Jefferson Davis, suppressing the John Brown.
Yeah, Jefferson Davis was the Secretary of War at the time.
Right. And that's how they met each other.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, one very important thing I also want to point out to you, that Messerschmitt, Henkel & Sons, Krupp, Junkers, Mercedes, Deutsche Bank, Volkswagen, all of these were part of the Nazi war effort in World War II. All of those were capitalist companies that still exist today. Because I heard you go on and talk about the failed system of communism. No, that was a failed system of Stalinism. As a Marxist, that's what I differ with you and other liberal anti-communists about.
Actually, it's a failed policy of unfettered, unregulated capitalism.
No, not quite. Because
yes,
unfortunately, when Trotsky wrote the book, The Revolution Betrayed, he explained what went wrong with the Soviet Union, and it was the Bonapartist nature of Stalinism. And that was the problem with the old Soviet Union.
Well, when you find yourself killing your own people, you've gone awry, and your system of government is a failure.
Yeah, because
and people make that very complicated, and it's not. You know, when you declare war on your own country, as the Confederacy did, or when you start killing your own people, as Stalin did after World War II, or when you start rounding up people and putting them in ghettos and gassing them, whatever the system of government is that you were advocating for has just lost. It has become a lost cause. So this fine line between Trotsky and Stalin and this one, it's all bullcrap. These are failed systems. They don't work. None of it works. The only thing that works is regulated capitalism. Regulated and strictly regulated to protect human rights, whether they be the right to earn a decent living, not to work more than 40 hours without being compensated, and it being your choice, no child labor, no discrimination. Other than that, there is nothing that works. Go to RandyRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.